I don't say this to anyone, but the morning everything stopped, I wasn't surprised. The alarm went off at 6:15, same as always. The house was still dark, and I lay there listening to it ring. And I thought, I don't know how to do this one more day. Not that, not all of it, not again. You have to understand what before looked like. Before was 5:45, before the alarm, before anyone needed anything. I would lie there in the dark for exactly 10 minutes, not sleeping, not resting, just running through the day. What needed doing? What I'd forgotten yesterday? What was going to fall apart if I didn't hold it together? The house on Birchwood had thin walls. You could hear everything: the furnace clicking on, the dog shifting on the kitchen floor. Ryan's breathing through the monitor. He was 3. Still used the monitor, that soft, steady in and out that meant everything was fine. I used to lie there in the dark and think, as long as I can hear that, nothing is wrong. And then I would get up, and I would begin. I made lunches before 6. Daniel's with no crusts, Ryan's with the green lid, not the blue one, the field trip form from Daniel's backpack signed and left by the door. Tom came downstairs at 7 to 10, poured his coffee, looked at the counter. "Have you seen my keys?" I pointed to the bowl by the door. He said thanks and left. I stood at the sink after he drove away. I don't know how long. The water was running and I wasn't doing anything with it. I turned it off. My phone buzzed. My mother. I looked at it and put it face down. I got Ryan dressed, packed the bag, drove them both to school, said have a good day, pulled out of the second parking lot at 8:47. On the drive home, I kept thinking I'd forgotten something. I went through the list twice: lunches, forms, green lid, backup pants. Nothing was missing. Everything was done. I couldn't figure out why it still felt like something was wrong. I got home and stood in the kitchen. The counter had a small coffee spill near the edge. Tom's, from the morning. I picked up the cloth and wiped it. Then I wiped the rest of the counter. Then I straightened the fruit bowl. Then I stood there holding the cloth and I didn't put it down. I'm not sure how long I stood there. The cloth was already dry. There was nothing left to wipe. I knew that. I just kept holding it. Eventually, I put it back on the hook. I looked at the kitchen. Everything was the way it was supposed to be. Dishes done, counter clean, permission slip by the door. I felt like I should start something else. I couldn't think what. I stood there a little longer, and then I sat down at the table. Not for any reason, just I sat down. And I thought, I can't remember the last time I sat down just because I wanted to. I didn't know what to do with that. So I got back up. There was a woman at Ryan's daycare pickup, Claire, I think, or Clara. I never learned it, who was always there before me. That Tuesday she was laughing at something on her phone. Small laugh, private. Like something was genuinely funny and she wasn't performing it for anyone. She looked up, gave me the polite smile, went back to her screen. I stood there holding Ryan's backup pants, the ones he hadn't needed, and I watched her for a second longer than I meant to. I picked up Ryan. He had paint on his elbow. I wiped it with the backup pants. We walked to the car. He fell asleep before the second light. I drove home and I kept thinking about her. Not in a bad way. I just kept seeing it. The laugh. The way she was just there, in the pickup line, not running anything. I tried to figure out what was bothering me about it. It wasn't jealousy. I knew what jealousy felt like. This was something else. Something I didn't have a word for. I drove the rest of the way home with that feeling sitting in the passenger seat, and I didn't look at it directly. And by the time I pulled into the driveway, I had almost convinced myself it wasn't there. That night after dinner, After baths, after the stories, after Tom fell asleep on the couch with the TV still on, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea I'd made and forgotten to drink. And I thought about the morning, my hands being tired before the day started, the counter I wiped without deciding to, Claire or Clara laughing at something small. And then I thought something I hadn't let myself think before. This wasn't about being tired. I'd been tired before. I knew tired. Tired was the thing that went away when you slept. This was something else. This was the feeling of running a machine that I had built, that nobody else could see, that nobody else knew existed, and that would stop working the moment I stopped running it. And I had been running it for so long that I'd stopped asking whether I'd been the one who was supposed to. 3 days later, a Thursday. I had been up since 5:45. Lunches, monitor, keys in the bowl, field trip form, the fruit bowl, the counter, all of it. Same as always. I got Ryan dressed. I went to pick up his shoes, the ones by the back door, the ones I always put there, and one of them was missing. Just one shoe. I looked behind the door, under the bench, in the hallway, in the kitchen. I checked the living room. I went upstairs. I came back down. I looked in the car. I stood in the garage for a full minute just standing there. One shoe. And something happened that I still don't entirely understand. I didn't cry. I didn't say anything. I didn't call for Tom. I just sat down on the garage floor, right there on the cold cement, in my work clothes, with the other shoe still in my hand. And I didn't get up. Ryan came to the garage door after a minute. He looked at me sitting on the floor and said, "Mama, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm just resting for a second, Bug." He said, "Okay," and went back inside. I sat there for a long time. I've thought about that garage floor a lot since then. Not the shoe. The shoe turned up in the recycling bin, which tells you something about how that house ran, but that's not the point. The point is what I was actually sitting with. Tom's keys, not mine. I'd been finding them, putting them in the bowl, every night, for 6 years. The permission slips, the allergy forms, the backup pants, the Easter message I never answered, the field trip I remembered and signed and mailed alone, the fruit bowl. Who decides what goes in the fruit bowl? I do. I always have. Nobody asked me to. Claire or Clara's laugh. My hands being tired before I was. The counter I wiped without deciding to. I had been running something enormous and invisible, and when one shoe went missing, I sat down on a cement floor because I had been standing for so long. I had forgotten I was allowed to stop. And the worst part, the part I kept coming back to, was that nobody had asked me to stand that long. I had done that to myself. That's the thing I didn't want to sit with. Because it's easier to be tired at someone, easier to count what they don't do. And I had a list, I had a list of everything Tom didn't notice, didn't remember, didn't think to do. But on the garage floor, with the cold coming through my work clothes, I thought about the bowl by the door. He had never asked me to put his keys there. I had just started doing it. One day I had just started doing it. And then it became the thing I did. And then it became mine. How many things had I picked up that way? How many things had I reached for before anyone asked, decided they needed doing, added them to the list, and then carried them like they had always been mine to carry? I didn't get up right away. That's the thing I want to say. I didn't solve it. I didn't make a plan. I didn't go back inside and have the conversation or draw the boundary or do any of the things you're supposed to do. I just sat there, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I let myself be the one sitting on the floor without immediately getting back up. Tom found the shoe in the recycling bin around noon. He texted me a photo of it with a question mark. I sent back a shrug emoji. He sent a laughing face. That was the whole conversation. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat in the kitchen again. Same table, same cold tea I'd make and forget. The house the way it gets when it's finally quiet, the furnace, the dog, the faint sound of Tom's TV through the ceiling. I sat there and I said it out loud. Not to anyone, just to the room. The keys, not mine. The fruit bowl, not mine. The permission slip nobody else remembered, that one I'm keeping. That one was mine. But the counter I wiped because I couldn't stop my own hands, not mine. The exhaustion I felt before the day started, because I was already running through everything that could go wrong, that one I had built myself, and I could put it down. I didn't cry. It wasn't that kind of feeling. It was quieter than that, like something that had been pulled tight for a very long time had just eased, just slightly, just enough. I sat there until the kitchen felt like mine again. Until I felt like mine again. If you are the one who knows where everything is, if you are the one who remembers before anyone asks, who notices before anything shows, who keeps it all running so smoothly that nobody knows there's anything to run, I just want you to know that I see it. And I want you to ask yourself, just once, in whatever quiet you can find, which parts of this did someone actually ask you to carry? Just notice. That's all. Just notice what you're holding. This is the weight she carries. And tonight, it's mine.